abuse of prescription painkillers.
It's changing the character of the neighborhood.
And use of illegal street drugs.
Being arrested for possession of crack cocaine
are leading to a record number of overdose deaths in America.
It's very manpower intensive.
South Florida has been hit especially hard. One person dies every day from a lethal drug overdose. Tonight, CBS 12 News presents a town hall meeting on the overdose epidemic. We will discuss the challenges facing law enforcement, families, and the community. Our expert panelists include Dave Ehrenberg, state attorney for Palm Beach County for 4 years and heavily involved in the Sober Homes Task Force. Dr. Michael Bell, medical examiner for Palm Beach County since 2005. Chief Deputy Gary Wilson oversees the daily operations for the St. Lucie Sheriff's Office. He has served in law enforcement for the past 30 years. And Dr. Raju Mangrola, medical director of Lighthouse Detox at Jupiter Medical Center and former emergency room doctor. CBS 12 News invites you to join the conversation. The Overdose Epidemic. Your voice, your future. And now, your moderator for tonight's town hall, Behind the Headlines host, Mark Hyman.
More than 52,000 people died from drug overdoses nationwide in 2015. More than 3,200 in Florida. Drug overdoses is now the leading cause of injury death in America, more than motor vehicles and firearms related. And half of drug ODs come from prescription painkillers and heroin. Good evening, I'm Mark Hyman, host of Behind the Headlines. Thank you at home for joining us. The overdose epidemic. Tonight we talk about it. Now we've assembled a terrific panel of experts who will address this issue. And we have a live audience here who will ask questions. But you at home can also join us in this important discussion. A question we ask live on air may be yours. CBS 12 anchor Linda Figueredo is manning our social media desk. She'll explain how you can be part of the discussion. Linda?
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you to our viewers who are joining the conversation online by submitting great questions and comments to our CBS 12 Facebook page. We are streaming live right now, and I will be sharing your posts throughout the evening. So make sure you share your thoughts on the overdose epidemic by visiting our Facebook page right here, facebook.com/CBS12. As you hear something interesting, leave a comment, and I will try my best to share your comments and questions with the panel. We already have some submissions that we want to share. First comment comes from Diane J. Lee. She questions why the governor isn't treating the overdose epidemic, like the Zika outbreak. Brandon Harrison said, "It's a shame. Most of the cases I have seen stemmed from prescription painkiller abuse. The reasoning is because heroin is much cheaper." Steve Shelb asked the panel, what is being done to help the people who flock to South Florida for treatment and prevent them from relapsing? So let's send that question back on over to our panel. What is being done to prevent addicts from relapsing in our community? Mark?
Thanks, Linda. What a great question. We'll go ahead and start off with that. And Mr. State's Attorney, let's go ahead and start off with you. You're first on the block there. What about current addicts? How do we break that cycle, get them clean so they don't have any relapses?
Unfortunately, what's happening is that the Florida model, which is supposed to encourage recovery, instead has encouraged relapse. And it's because of the illicit money that changes hands. The money that is a violation of Florida law, the patient brokering, the improper patient compensation, is stuff that we are focused on. We think if we can get the money out of the system, then people who need the treatment can get it instead of just being brokered around to the highest bidder. And it's a corrupting influence, as I said earlier, that promotes relapse instead of recovery. So we're doing our part from a law enforcement level, but you can't arrest your way out of this problem. You need a holistic system that we all work together. But unfortunately, federal laws and state laws have not kept up with this epidemic. So we've been forced, law enforcement at the local level has really been forced to do it alone.
I want to bring the Chief Deputy into this, and the State's Attorney had just mentioned the criminal aspect, and no doubt there is so much crime involved in this, but drug overdoses don't recognize age, race, sex, or ethnicity boundaries. Anyone can become a victim, and it's the most indiscriminate killer, what we've seen going on today. So we're, without a doubt, indeed in the middle of a health emergency. Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of people you come across in your job? Because these all aren't just street guys who are hardened addicts. who become the problem. You see people from all walks of life, don't you?
Absolutely, Mark, and that's one of the strong points about this is that because of the pill epidemic that we went through in the from about 2006 to 2012, where it was at its peak, we had all kinds of people, all walks of life, having problems with prescription medication. And in large part because they suffered from legitimate injuries that doctors put them on addictive prescription medication, got them hooked on those medications, and that's the kind of people that we're having to deal with in our jails and people that we've arrested, just normal, everyday people in all walks of life.
And Dr. Mangarolo, I'd like to bring you in the conversation. At CBS 12, we've heard from so many doctors who said one of the challenges for them is someone will walk in with a page they've ripped out of Time magazine and they'll say, I want this drug. This is what I need right now because I have X, Y, and Z. Please prescribe it to me. Is it a more challenging time for doctors to deal with patients because, let's say, they're more knowledgeable about what's out there, and certainly their insistence of receiving some kind of prescription medication?
Yes, Mark, I think it's very right that it has become more challenging in the last several years, especially with the rise in the opioid epidemic. And patients have become very sophisticated, that's probably the best word, to come up with all the symptoms, and the ability to, I think it's very incumbent on the physician to get all the records to make sure that there is a right reason to give the medicine or not give the medicine. And patient will, I'm not saying the word fake it, but they will try to present with their symptoms to convince the doctor. And you know, with the doctors are busy enough, they need to take more time to assess if properly give the medication, and avoid as much as possible if not to use the opioid medication as the first drug of approach, option. I think the federal government has made it a recommendation, the FDA has made that recommendation, CDC has made that recommendation. So I think allowing more time, reviewing records, and really screening them through several levels, I think that would be a better way to approach the problem, and it is very challenging, yes.
Thankfully, our healthcare system is perfect. We don't have any problems right now. With our first audience member question, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Peggy Hernandez. I live in Wellington. And my question is, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for everything that you all do, because I have just passed the year mark of my son's death. He died February 2016 of fentanyl. He thought he was doing heroin, and it was 100% fentanyl. So he was dead the moment he did it. I found him in his room dead, 23 years old. I'm an educated, married, wonderful family, typical, go to church on Sunday. Everything was perfect in our life. And then this hit our house. We didn't even know it was available here. We didn't know anything about it. I want to know, like every parent out here wants to know. And I'm doing my part to educate the parents, to let them know what to look for, because now looking back, I see what the things he was doing. And I didn't think anything of it, but now knowing what I know now, I'm telling other parents and trying to educate other people in the community. My question is why, if this has been such a big concern, and we're going back looking at records of 2015, 2016, and now we're in 2017, getting ready to go into March, why has it not been discussed until now when it is such a huge problem? Why didn't the communities know about it?
First of all, we're very sorry for your loss. Your son Ty, right?
My son Ty.
So we're very sorry for your loss. Dr. Bell, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. And I'm going to stay with Ms. Hernandez for a moment, because what we've heard here at CBS 12 and our sister stations around the country is this is not untypical. There's so many families who say, I didn't see the signs. And maybe the first step for our viewers at home are, what are the things that perhaps people should look for, or if they see that should perhaps pique their interest? And maybe it might be something as simple as that gut check, that sometimes you feel something's not right in your gut. Maybe start thinking about, my son is doing this, my daughter is doing that, I should ask more questions. Any thoughts on what viewers at home should be looking for?
Well, remember, I just see dead people, the fatal overdoses, and quite frankly, most of the victims that I see are white, mostly men, some women as well, combination. They range from their 20s all the way up to 70s. And for the most part, they have a history of drug abuse. How far back it goes is not always known, but most of the victims do have a history of abusing drugs, whether it's prescription opiates. But what I've noticed in the last couple of years is the switch to heroin, whether injecting or snorting, very popular nowadays. You buy the little capsules filled with powder. You think you're getting heroin. You don't know what you're getting. In this case was fentanyl, but we've seen all kinds of things within one capsule. It's not just one drug in there anymore. There's multiple drugs. So, but to get back to your point, what do you look for? I mean, obviously, it changes in behavior, probably the first thing. Reclusive, getting money, spending it, where's it going? Hang out with people that's kind of shady. So there's probably more things than that, but obviously you don't want to wait until I see them. I shouldn't be the first doctor that sees them.
I'd like to bring Dr. Mangarolo back in the conversation. Something to add?
Yes, there are a lot of, I'm very sorry to hear about your son's death, Ms. Hernandez. There are a lot of things that I think as a parent, and it may be easy for me to say that, but the change in behavior, change in mood, they get more erratic, they get more moody, they sleep more, they get more sedated, they zone off, they're kind of distracted easily. They're failing in school. That's one of very typical, where the grades are dropping, they're missing school. The sleep cycle has changed, they stay up at night and they sleep during the day. The people they hang out with, the phone calls, and you might find somebody who is not on their phone list and kind of talk, the way they interact with them, and even their interaction with you, even they're sort of, they may carry much longer conversation with you, and all of a sudden, if they're taking something, their conversations may change. And as a mother, you can pick up things very quickly. I have to say that as a family member, you can pick up things much faster. And I'm not saying, I think there are a lot of different subtle signs that come up, But a lot of these things, you don't see it every day. You're not going to question your child that, you're doing something wrong. You have to have a high index of suspicion that there's some variation. Even the colleague or a sibling can point out, they can be very good at getting that kind of information, that there is something different with the family member,
I'd like to bring the Chief Deputy back in the conversation, something that perhaps every parent in America wrestles with, and the doctor alluded to it. There's often those boundaries, whether they're 13 or 14 years old in high school, or they're college age. Parents often wrestle with, what are the boundaries? What can I ask my children? Where am I going too far? Anything you care to add?
Well, you're a mom, you're a dad. I don't know that there are boundaries. I think as parents, we all like to think and respect those boundaries, especially as they get older. But if you suspect or if you have any idea, there are no boundaries. Whether it's going through their stuff in their room, looking through their dressers, looking through their phone and things like that. If you suspect that there's something going on, and of course a lot of times you don't know what's going on. I mean, it's difficult to pick up on some of it a lot of the time, but there should be no boundaries. If you suspect that there's something going on with your child, you need to do everything you can to try and get to the bottom of it and redirect them away from the activity that they're involved in.
And Mr. State's Attorney, there's probably no easy way to say this, but sadly, with things like heroin and fentanyl, there may not be that buildup where there's been smaller incidents or smaller events. It's unlike alcohol or perhaps marijuana, where people can kind of play around with it for a while. With these illicit drugs, the first time use can be fatal.
Yeah. And first, Mr. Hernandez, I'm so sorry for the loss of your son, Ty. I've spoken to so many mothers who have lost children. And just know that we're out there every day trying to prevent other mothers from having to go through what you've had to go through. Because, yes, a lot of people don't know their children are involved with this stuff until it's too late. And it doesn't have to be over time. It can be one time. One of the real problems is that today's heroin is not your father's heroin anymore. It is spiked now with cheap, potent Chinese fentanyl and carfentanil. And we were urging publicly our government to do something to get the Chinese government to stop the flow of fentanyl into this country. The good news is that just about a week ago, the Chinese government announced that they will, as of tomorrow, stop fentanyl by making it illegal, and now we're hoping that it will dry up. We saw the same thing with Flocka. Flocka was prevalent on our streets, but no longer because the Chinese government stopped it. We're hoping now that they will stop fentanyl and carfentanil. It will save lives. But we're also going after the drug dealers, no longer just for drug selling, but for murder. The drug dealer who sold that to your son, who should be responsible for the death of your son, because that drug dealer had heroin mixed in with fentanyl, which is deadly. So we have new approaches, and I think we are turning the corner in this fight.
Can I say one thing?
Please.
I just want to say that we did get my son's drug dealer. He was the first case that was prosecuted in Florida. We got him. He's behind bars, and he'll be there for 30 years.
And that's new. That's something that's a new approach
Very
by
new.
prosecutors to do that, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to go back to the live audience. Sir, please join me up here. Tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
My name is Garrett Jacobs. I own the Boca Raton Funeral Home and the Garden Cemetery in Boca Raton, Florida. Previously this month, we had 4 overdoses. I'd like to talk about the collateral damage, the families that are left behind. There's a stigma involved with having a heroin or an addict of any kind have an overdose. And the families are devastated. They weren't expecting this. And with the media today, with what's going on, with the sober homes that you brought up, and the devastation that's going on, there's more public and advertisement about that than there are about the arrests being made of the heroin dealers. So the thing I keep hearing from the families are that heroin doesn't grow in Palm Beach County. We had 216 deaths of overdose heroin addicts this past year. So it's coming in from somewhere. I didn't want to get political. I don't want to talk about the wall. I don't want to talk about borders. But it's coming in. It's not from here. And I think we need to put more emphasis on the dealers and educating the public that addiction is a disease. So we can't put a stigma on these families that have the addiction. So I'd like to know what your opinion is, and how do you think we can educate the public more on the proper places to go for help, and also stopping the drugs from coming into the area.
And Dr. Mangrolo, I want to bring you back into the conversation. He makes a really good point. If we have a family member who has cancer, people put up a GoFundMe page, they put up a Facebook page, they talk about having community meals provided to the family to help them through this. If a family member has an addict, it's almost as if they're shamed and shunned and they're embarrassed. Do we need to fix that perception in society?
Yes. I think in general, just looking at a much broader scope of mental health and also substance abuse problem, it's always looked down upon with shame and stigma, and that needs to change, because this is the epidemic of the decade or years to come, and we have to embrace the reality of, so many people are dying so quickly, so fast, and the numbers, 50,000 people in 2015, that's staggering, So I think the education component is very relevant, very important, something like this, and doing quite a few of these kind of meetings or approaching at a community level every time. And I was thinking about coming here, talking about this. The thing that came to my mind was the AIDS epidemic when it hit San Francisco in the 80s. Nobody knew what it was, and the community got together and everybody regardless of, AIDS was a shameful sort of disease at that point, but now it is well accepted. I think we need that kind of camaraderie with all levels of people, disciplines, professionals, and community to embrace this and help the people out. I think my heart goes out to the family members when there's somebody passes away from drug overdose, and the psychological impact is huge. They go through a parent's child dying before their death. I think that's probably the worst thing a parent can have, and they never recover. And I'm a psychiatrist, and they're going to need a lot of counseling, a lot of therapy, and it's irreparable. So I think that realization is very important, and I think through having these kind of education, it will help, definitely help.
Mr. State's Attorney, let's stick with that family aspect and collateral damage. And this is probably a tough thing to say, but let's call it tough love. Because what we've heard here at CBS 12 more than once is parents who said you can't love your child out of addiction, that emotional aspect is not enough. You need other resources to help that. Would you care to talk about some of the resources that are out there and how a parent should maybe separate themselves from the love they have from their child and say, look, I need to take care of my child or my brother or my sister or my father or whoever the relative is, my loved one, and get them the help they need?
Yeah, I feel for the parents. They've usually tried over and over and over again. And, relapse is part of recovery, unfortunately, because heroin is such a powerful drug that it's hard for someone to get healthy and sober on their first try at rehab. And so they go through cycles. But unfortunately, our federal laws have created this system that has made it harder for parents. So what happens is, if people are watching from out of state, there are many of them who have sent their children to Florida to get healthy. 75% of all private pay individuals in treatment come from out of state. But they don't know that the sober home that they may be sending their child to is really a flop house, or they may not know that the rehab center is has a marketer who's paying for the patient. And because of the generous benefits of the Affordable Care Act, as many times as you relapse, you keep getting new benefits. And so there's no financial incentive to get sober, to get clean. And so federal law through the ACA, a well-intended law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, a well-intended law, the Fair Housing Act, the Mental Health Parity Act, all these things have come into play to be exploited by unscrupulous actors in the treatment industry to then, instead of getting people healthy, to get them back into relapse and eventually to die. And it's a tragedy. And it can be avoided. It can be prevented. It just needs some tweaks and some political courage. But unfortunately, at the federal level, there's more indifference when it comes to this issue.
And let's stay with this whole topic of families and the relationships they have. And we've got a story we're going to show in just a moment about a young man named Jordan who seemed to have all the right things going for him in life, had a great family, and then things kind of went sideways. And let's go ahead and take a look at Jordan's story if we can.
He was always so happy.
He was a great kid.
He was always very respectful.
Jordan Spinato was not the most talented or skilled athlete at American Heritage High School, but in the state championship game in 2007, he had an opportunity to etch his name into Florida high school legend.
Jordan Spinato, a 5'8" senior who has not attempted a field goal all year.
It happened so fast. It was like, let's just give the kid a shot.
I thought the last thing in the world was going to happen. He was going to make a 43-yard field goal.
We were like, oh my God, what if he doesn't make it?
To win a title. The kick is up. The kick is good. It's good.
It's like the moment you just dream of.
One of the greatest endings of a football game like I've ever been a part of.
State championship on a kick. No, those are things that you see in books, and you hear those stories and those myths.
Most exciting moment of my life right now.
After graduation from American Heritage, Jordan bounced around. He took some community college classes, crashed on some sofas with friends, and even spent a year in California with family. He returned home in the summer of 2013, and that's when his family started to notice a change. The All-American kid with the great attitude was arrested. The charges were eventually dropped.
Then we realized he was really with kids he didn't belong
that we
to be
didn't
hanging
know.
out
And
with.
normally we knew everybody.
And those new friends were introducing Jordan to a new world.
He was a mama's boy, and he always was, and it was hard to have that happen.
I didn't know that person. I didn't want him around my kids. I didn't even want to be in the same room as him. He was not my brother.
The Spinato family began to wonder if their son, who 5 years ago had experienced that ultimate sports high, was now trying to get that feeling from somewhere else.
I went in his room and I found like some tinfoil and stuff. I'm like, I don't know what this is, but Google really tells you everything.
When he looked at us in the face and we said, either you're going to have to move out or go to rehab, and he said, it's me and I need help.
We just kept saying, be that percentage that makes it.
You read all of these horror stories, and I guess we were the horror story, The worst happened.
Jordan spent 40 days in rehab. On his third day home, Claude and Kim walked in on something no parent should see.
He wasn't answering the door. And in the back of my mind, I think I knew. My husband had to take the doorknob off and open the door.
Fortunately, we found him in our home, but that's better than not finding him at all.
He was a kid that you thought had it all, had it all going for him.
I just want to die. I mean, it's like the happiest moment. How could this kid, surrounded by all that love, how could this happen to him? It's like just heart-wrenching. My heart has a hole in it. I just want to relive that moment again.
A respectful, happy young man from a close family. If heroin can take down Jordan Spinato, it can take down anyone.
Oh, man, what a kick.
Spinato may have made the kick of his life, but he could not kick the one thing that took it.
My goodness, what ice water in the veins right there for Spinato. He drills it. Jordan Spinato.
Chief Deputy, it's every athlete's dream is to score the winning points to win the championship for your team. So we have this young man surrounded by a family that loved him, who went from the highest mountain down to the depths of despair. It must underscore what you've seen, that while there are those people who perhaps have had challenged lives and end up going down the wrong path, this is an example of someone who seemed to be on the best of all paths, the hometown high school hero, and then he ends up losing his battle to this drug. Any suggestions at how we as families can perhaps help head off some of these things? Are there distractions or other options that we can put forward to someone so that they don't head down the wrong path if it's recreational use?
The truth of it is, it's very difficult to be a kid today. I don't care what, if you look back to older generations and the distractions that you might have had, which were far and few between, before the internet, before 250 channels on your television set, before social media, before all of those things, it's very difficult for young people today to work through all the things that are being thrown at them, coming in all kinds of directions, plus go to school, plus do these things. And early in my career, I taught drug education in the schools as a school resource person. And the only things we ever talked about was, for the most part, marijuana. That was the big thing back then. Now, as was pointed out by one of the speakers, that you can get, or in the video, you can get all the information you want off of Google. And it's just tough. I think it takes everybody in a community. It takes a strong family. It takes everybody in a community, people in the schools, law enforcement, to work as part of the community to try and find avenues to redirect these people. I mean, as you said, to win the game with the field goal of his life, and then have it go off. I'm sure had a lot to do with the distractions that came afterwards once he graduated and met a whole new group of people. And those are the things we have to focus on.
Dr. Bell, I'm going to have you, I know you're a medical examiner, but I want you to take off that hat for a moment, just kind of as a parent and as a member of the community, think about this, and then afterwards I want to check in with Linda to see what our viewers at home think about all this. But the Chief Deputy made some good points about all the distractions that are going on in life. There's so many things that attract our attention. What about that missed opportunity where fewer and fewer families have that one meal around the table where they can have the conversation and look into a loved one's eyes, a family member, a close person, a roommate, what have you, and see those changes taking place? If you could prescribe something like that, do we need that in society, that forced time to sit down and say, I want to spend an hour with my family at dinner time and have a conversation?
Well, I have 4 kids, and that's exactly what we did every night. You know, everybody lives a very busy life right now. You know, the kids are all, you know, doing some type of activity or playing soccer or what have you. So it was great to be able to sit down and eat together at the same time. But, you know, addiction is a difficult problem. It's a difficult disease. It's not just, you know, if this happens, you're going to become an addict. You know, it's really a maladaptive behavior to the, I guess, kind of the lows in your life. You know, your life there's ups and there's downs. You kick the field goal, but there's other times when, you know, you're not feeling so great. And I think people who become addicts do not handle that well. And so they turn towards alcohol, drugs, what have you. I think if there was any recommendation, you're not going to persuade an addict to go into rehab or what have you. They're going to have to decide themselves. You're not going to cure the addict. But what you can do is get help yourself. You've probably heard of Al-Anon. Well, there's the same with, you know, narcotics, with, you know, narcotic addicts. Families, the people who love the addict, they need to seek help as well. There's 12-step programs. There's other mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters who will help them, you know, get through this. And it doesn't always turn out well. Those are the people that I see. Sometimes it does. But you need that support. Because you're right, drug addiction, there's a lot of stereotypes organizing around it. You know, people, they think they're homeless, they're not strong enough, they don't have enough willpower. Well, that's bullshit, okay? That has to be, people have to educate themselves about that. It's a disease. These are having, like I said, these are kids who are your neighbors.
Dr. Mangrola, one quick comment from you, and then I want to check in with Linda to find out what our viewers think about all this. Something that Dr. Bell had just mentioned about sometimes the addict has to make that decision. There's that point where they decide, I need to get better. Have you ever noticed any themes or any trends? Is there something particular you see more often than not when someone says, now's the day, I need to get clean?
I think it is when there is more pressure on them, whether it may be job related, a legal problem, a DUI, pressure from the family, you know, cutting the finances, or losing something else, losing a lot, like a girlfriend, or, you know, they will say they'll break off a relationship. A lot of times they might do something because they're doing that to appease the family member, appease the girlfriend, or just satisfy the court requirements. And sometimes they say, all right, I need to do this before I want to take care of this because I have a problem, you know. A lot of times the denial is so big, so huge, you know, that we tend to forget that with addiction, the denial aspect is probably the driving factor for all these people who have addiction. So I think that's, and the relationship with the family member. If there's a good relationship and there is no confrontation or, you know, combative relationship, then there's a better chance for that person to voluntarily say yes, you know. But a lot of times when these things happen, the family relationships get strained, and you know, the first thing I'm going to say is I'm going to say no, I don't need this, I'm fine, you know. So I think there are a lot of different factors that can come into play when somebody decides to go for treatment. So
a lot of meaningful and thoughtful discussion from our panelists here. Let's find out what our viewers at home think about all this. Linda, what do you have for us?
Well, Mark, the conversation is really picking up as our viewers are lending their thoughts on the overdose epidemic. What's trending right now is the issue of tainted drugs claiming lives in sober homes. We just got some of these messages into our Facebook page as we're live streaming right now. They're looking at your comments and your questions. Brianna Merck says, it's a scary time to be an addict. In response, a CBS 12 viewer, Patricia Jakey, said, the common misconception is that addicts didn't know about the fentanyl, but they actually paid extra for it. They know they are putting dangerous drugs in their veins. And finally, we just got this question posed onto our CBS 12 Facebook page. This is from Jamie Fedig. She says, what is the community doing to address the patient brokering by so-called reputable facilities, encouraging addicts to get high to get into facilities and being paid for this? I mean, we know we just heard from the district attorney talking about the crackdown on sober homes in our area. So let's push that question back out to the panel to discuss the crackdown on sober homes and what can be done to help addicts actually recover in our community. Mark?
Thank you, Linda. Mr. State's Attorney, this is your area.
Yes, we got a $275,000 appropriation from the state legislature to create a task force to go after abuses in the treatment and sober home industries. So we've created 3 task forces. One is a law enforcement task force where we put together leads, and we have made 19 arrests since July, which is we're the only county in the country doing something like that, where they dedicated law enforcement task force where we have made significant progress. And our main focus is illegal patient brokering. Actually, all patient brokering is illegal, but we're going after that in the industry. The feds have helped us by going after the insurance fraud angle. And I'm joined today by Chief Assistant Al Johnson, who leads our task force. Our other 2 task forces have come up with legislation to change state and hopefully one day federal law to give us a fighting chance against the abuses in the industry, because we can't do it ourselves. As I said earlier, you know, our laws are really weak in this area. Even when we prosecute a patient brokering case, it takes 58 counts to qualify for prison time. So we're getting jail time at the local level, but we need more firepower from Tallahassee and Washington, D.C.
And Mr. State's Attorney, I presume that you offer confidentiality if people come forward to report things. Is there a website or a phone number you'd like to promote tonight that perhaps we'll certainly discuss it tonight? We'll put it on our Facebook page as well so people know that they can come to you if they see something they know that needs to be addressed.
Yes, we have a 24-hour tip line for the sober homes. And because I want to make sure it's accurate, I would like to, if I can give it to you to post, we'll make sure it's up on the web through CBS 12. But Al Johnson and his great team of investigators, we operate this tip line, this sober homes tip line. And sometimes we get amazing tips that have led to sober homes being shut down. Sometimes it's calls from worried parents from out of state to see if a sober home facility is as advertised or is their son at a flop house. So we get all types of calls, and you know that's what it's there for.
And of course, you can offer confidentiality or some other type of support if someone's on the inside and says, look, what we're doing is wrong, I need to come forward.
Sure, absolutely. You know, I'm so pleased to be able to work with law enforcement, and together we have given people confidentiality, we have acted on tips, and we are paying attention. And I think we're turning the corner. The fact that we've made 19 arrests so far, and still, I think we are closer to the beginning than the end of our fight.
We're back to our live audience. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
I'm Caitlin Hernandez. I live in Wellington, and I'm more concerned about what you're doing about the youth and schooling and how this is affecting them, being that I'm 14 years old, 15 now, and I'm going into high school. I want to know what's going to be the approach, what I'm going to have to look forward to when I go into high school. This is going to be a big thing because drugs are big in high school. So,
Doctor, she raises a good point, particularly when it comes to high school age teenagers. They all think they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. How do we change that and educate our young men and women to realize that they're vulnerable?
I think, as Deputy Sheriff Wilson was talking about earlier, I think having regular education about addiction, specifically talking about these drugs, heroin, fentanyl, in depth, I think it's important. I'm not saying you make it a class or a exam, but having a general education as a routine and having community meetings in the school, having professionals like me to come and talk, or other professionals, and make it an awareness, and somebody, you know, the peer pressure is a big factor in school. You know, that's what leads to, you know, we were talking about that case on TV about the football player, you know, and Jordan. And I think the peer pressure has to be, the counselors have to be very vigilant about this matter in the school system, you know, in the school counselors. So I think there are a lot of different things, and having the family members involved too in the process. So I think there has to be a lot of back and forth between the students, the family members, and the school staff and professionals involved. I think it's an ongoing process. They do it all year round. I think, again, this is just a suggestion. This is just a thought. You know, I'm not sure. You know, I think something material could be allowed in the county. I think it will be very helpful, and the awareness would increase significantly. I think the sad part is somebody who's 13 or 14, a 17-year-old would be very easily can manipulate them to give them something the first time, second time, and then they're hooked, you know, and then it's too late, you know. So all of these things have to be, you know, looked into, you know, without being punitive. You know, I think being punitive is not a good thing you know, when you put it in the school system, you know. So,
Chief Deputy?
We have in St. Lucie County, the St. Lucie County School Board offers drug education in the schools. But one of the things that the Sheriff's Office is doing, and it actually goes to your age group, is we have a program that we do in the schools called NOPE, Narcotics Overdose Prevention Education. And we hold these sessions in and around the school system in middle and high school. And what we do is we bring in parents and loved ones of those who have lost a child or a loved one to an overdose. And those people present to the student body. And we have found great results from that. And it's very, very impactful to the students to hear real life stories from the parents, from brothers, from sisters like yourself, who get up there and speak and educate these students about all of the aspects that we're talking about here tonight. And we have found that to be very, very beneficial in our schools, and we're getting great commentary about what we're doing.
And a quick follow-up, Chief Deputy, and I know you have the chief of your investigative unit here who deals with this. Assuming money's no object, is there something out there that perhaps, from whether it's an education or a law enforcement perspective, something that we're not doing, that perhaps that if you had your wish list, you said, I wish society could do X, Y, and Z, I think it would be a great way to help reduce this problem?
Well, one thing I can tell you for certain is we are never going to arrest our way out of these problems. This is far beyond law enforcement being able to arrest out of this problem. But one of the things that I think would be very beneficial is more availability of treatment centers, and treatment centers that can take care of those that don't have insurance, don't have the funds to get into a program. We have a very good program at the St. Lucie County Jail. We have a 60-day drug rehabilitation program when you're incarcerated in the jail for both men and women. And it's a shot, and some people benefit from it, but there needs to be more programs like that that are available for those who unfortunately become addicted to either opioids or heroin or whatever the case may be.
And Mr. State's Attorney, I'm kind of put you on the spot here a little bit, and I realize this may be a politically sensitive one, but what about the larger issue in many jurisdictions around the country where they have separate drug courts, where they have kind of a different approach to how they deal with someone who's got a problem, knowing that they're not a distribution and manufacturing, but they're on the downstream side, and they're really a victim.
Right, and Mike, I remember the phone number offhand. It's 1-888 for our Sober Home Hotline, just as an initial matter, 1-844-324-5463. And as I said, we'll make sure it's posted for all tips. We have a very active drug court in Palm Beach County, and it's a pretty expansive program. If you're a nonviolent drug possessor, a user, you can avoid prosecution by going through a very rigorous program of frequent testing, and then if you stay clean for a certain period of time, you can have the charges eventually dismissed. And it really does help, because our focus has been on always doing justice. It's not to convict in every case, and we don't want our jails filled with nonviolent drug users who need help, who need rehabilitation. Our focus on shutting down rogue sober homes is because we want to protect the individual at the lowest stages of their lives, someone with substance abuse disorder who's being exploited by a rogue sober home owner for profit. So we do have a very active drug court, and by the way, that is different though than if someone is selling. If you're a drug dealer, you're a businessman, and you're not eligible for drug court.
We're back to the live audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
My name is Brian Hester. I'm the lieutenant over the Special Investigations Unit for the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office. I've been asked to come up here and talk about a program that Sheriff Mascara implemented late last year. And with all the discussions of the families and some of the stigmas and how we're handling the heroin epidemic or the opioid epidemic, I thought it was appropriate to discuss a program that we implemented last year. It's a very simple program on the Treasure Coast, and we're actually working to with 4 other agencies on the Treasure Coast to implement this program there as well. But we simply send detectives out, narcotics, detectives who are experienced and trained in dealing with narcotics and interviews, to every overdose that we encounter within our jurisdiction. Those detectives go out for several reasons, a variety of reasons, but mainly to collect data, to collect information from the family, friends, anyone on scene. This is a very trying time when you have an overdose, and typically those individuals that are on scene, whether it's the victim or family members or friends, are more acceptable to answering questions and giving information. We don't use that information to build a case against the victim of that overdose. We simply take that information and the fresh evidence that's there on that scene, and we use it to go after the dealers and the sellers of those drugs. In doing so, we also collect a lot of other data, demographical data, geographical data, and any other data that we can around the overdoses. And it actually gives us real numbers to deal with as law enforcement, because many times we rely on the medical examiner's reports or numbers, or the fire department's numbers. So we're taking our own data, our own real data, and we're able to use that. How do we use that? Well, our operations, and when we target those suspected drug dealers, we use that data that we collect to see if it makes a difference and if it makes an impact. And I'm happy to say that over the last probably 6 months, we've seen that data used, and the information that was collected to go after target those drug dealers. We've seen a difference in the overdoses after those arrests are made, a sharp decline in many cases.
Do you have a website or a phone number you'd like to plug?
We do. We have the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office website. You can go to our website, and we have an anonymous tip line that you can provide any information. You can also go to the Treasure Coast Crime Stoppers, or you can call our office line, which is 772-463-7300 as well.
You know, Mr. State Prosecutor, a theme that's come up several times this evening is the whole issue of stigma. Is it time we just take it out of the shadows? And how do we encourage families and friends, employers, neighbors to be a part of that process, say, stop the shaming? As Dr. Mangrola said, it's a disease.
Yeah, silence and shaming are the enemy. it leads to unnecessary deaths. And we need to do our part to help lift that stigma. And you're doing your part. CBS 12 is doing a real service by having this town hall. The more we can talk about it, the more awareness is out there, it really does help us. When attention is paid to this, more than anything else that I've ever done, I see a direct correlation between publicity about an issue and saving lives and actually success in an issue. Because there are so many families out there who think that this can never happen to them, that heroin is some drug that you use in a back alley with junkies and it's with needles. No, it is now mainstream, it's cheap, accessible. It's not just with needles, as was said, you can snort it now, you can smoke it, there's so many things. It looks like pills as they're crunched together. So yes, by lifting the stigma, we're going to help save lives. And I think things like this are a huge service. You know, another thing that parents of lost children are doing, when it comes to their obituaries, they're actually mentioning the cause of death. Before, people didn't want to talk about it. And all of a sudden, you'd see an otherwise healthy 24-year-old end up dead in an obituary. But now they're actually mentioning the fact that their loved one died of an overdose, of an opioid overdose. And that is causing people to talk, and that, I do believe, will help save lives.
Dr. Bell, I want to get a comment from you, and then I want to check back in with Linda to find out what our viewers think of all this. You mentioned this earlier in the program, and I think this bears repeating. For many of us who witnessed what went on with the drug epidemic, particularly heroin in the 70s and 80s, we tend to think of that spoon over the Bunsen burner with the needle and the strap. And the heroin is so pure today, they can be ingested in so many forms. Could you talk about what you've seen in general? Because I'm guessing there aren't as many needle tracks on the arms as there used to be because people are snorting it under the lip, ingesting it.
Yes, they are snorting it more. So you look for the powder to the residue. The powder, they often use money as the straw. But we still see intravenous injections. You'll still see track marks. But because there's less filler, because it's more pure, you don't get, they're not so obvious. You don't get the lumps and bumps on the surface of the skin, which you would see decades ago. So it's harder to see even when I'm looking for it. But you know, it's still kind of a mixture, intravenous injection versus snorting, less so smoking.
And Dr. Mangrola, and of course, we've kind of focused here in the last several minutes on heroin, but people can overdose on a whole lot of stuff, including prescription painkillers. And that still is a problem in too many areas, including here in South Florida.
Yes. I think the other important element, you know, we focused on heroin and the use, you know, the increased mix of heroin with fentanyl and using pure forms of fentanyl. But I'm sure Dr. Bell may have encountered that when these overdoses occur, they are also taking, I know people don't talk about Xanax. People don't talk about Valium, Klonopin, the tranquilizers, somas and everything. A lot of these patients who take pain medication, opiates, they also take all these combination of medications, and that increases the risk for overdose. And in the hospital, we see a lot of these accidental overdoses. I'm called in because there's an overdose at least a couple of times a week in the ICU, you know, because they are on 3 or 4 medications, and you know, they take it all together. Next thing you know, they stop breathing, you know. So I think it's very important to, the data now shows that as bad as heroin is, as bad as fentanyl is and opiates are, the drug class, what we call benzos, benzodiazepines, they are also become very, very potent drugs and abusable drugs. And combining them with opiates has become, it's a sure sign of leading to overdose or death. You know, it's very important, but people don't talk about it, you know. So
let's take a moment and find out what our viewers think of tonight's program so far. Linda, what do you have for us?
Well, Mark, people are really talking about the treatment facilities and overprescribing for pain. Many question if the treatment industry were better regulated, could it help prevent this epidemic? We also have a Twitter poll right now on the CBS 12 Twitter page. Where does the responsibility lie in stopping the opioid epidemic? There you're seeing the percentages. The majority saying 61% parents at home. They believe that's where the responsibility lies. We're also getting a lot of comments into our CBS 12 Facebook page. Anthony Funker Jr. wrote, "We have an opioid epidemic in this nation thanks to doctors in the pharmaceutical industry. The doctors overprescribe opiates. Then the patients become addicted, and when they can no longer get or afford prescription opiates, they turn to street opiates and cheaper resources." Janet Burnfield saying, "But people in a lot of pain need them. It is not a one fix for all." And we're also getting this question on our CBS 12 Facebook page. Lynn Egan Cannon wrote, "Where can families who have lost a child to drug overdose get the help in Palm Beach County?" A very important question for so many families that are struggling with this issue, and we'll turn that back over to the panel. Mark?
Thanks, Linda. And actually, Dr. Mangrola, I want to go back to you for just a moment, because we had a guest earlier this evening, a funeral director, who addressed the source of drugs. And the challenge sometimes when you address these issues is that they become very political, because people look for other reasons why you have that conversation. You want to stop drugs coming over the border, but somehow it becomes an immigration issue. You want to talk about the overprescription of medication, now it becomes a Health Care Affordable Care Act issue. And one of the things we've heard at CBS 12, as a number of doctors have told us, is that sometimes they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because they have their accrediting agency, the Joint Commission, scores doctors and medical practices on pain management. So doctors say, now I'm challenged because my accrediting agency says you're not doing a good job of managing pain, but I start having Hippocratic concerns about prescribing medication for people that don't need it. It must be a tough position for a doctor to be in today.
Yes, it is. It is a tough position, and I think if you go back a little bit in the late 90s, or there was a movement that there was a thinking there was a political thinking, and by the pharmaceutical industry. Everybody is familiar with Purdue Pharmaceuticals, who came out with OxyContin, and they were sued and they settled for billions of dollars. The thinking was that opiates were not addictive and you can prescribe as much as you want, and if the doctors didn't treat the pain, they were sanctioned. Now the shift has moved away a little bit, and the state has put some safeguards, that if there is somebody needs to be on pain medication, they need a psychiatric evaluation to make sure they don't have addiction problem. But the doctors have become very reluctant to give the medication, and I think rightfully so, because of this fear. They have been watched, and they're afraid they're going to get reprimanded for whatever they do or don't do. Accidentally the patient may do something, and even in the county, I think the state attorney can talk about this, but doctors have been prosecuted for overprescribing and having unwanted consequences. So yes, it is it's a very delicate matter. So.
And Chief Deputy, we're almost out of time, but I want to give you a chance to share a couple thoughts.
Well, I think it's been mentioned here tonight. I think efforts like this to have an open dialogue about this, it helps in every situation. And we need to be more out in the community talking about these things and trying to work together to get this situation under control. And I think that's evident in everything that was said here tonight.
And Mr. State's Attorney, you get the last word.
Well, thank you for having this great panel. I got my start in this area in going after Purdue Pharma. I was at the Attorney General's office, and we were the first state in the country to investigate them. We settled with them, and the people who wrote in are so right on point. This started, I believe, too, with overprescribing and these new drugs that were supposed to be safe and non-addictive when it was neither. And yet, there is a place for them in our world, but we need to be careful when using them.
And we're going to have to leave it there because we've run out of time. Our nation has waged a war on drugs for decades now, and whether it's the use of prescription pharmaceuticals, illegal narcotics produced in makeshift labs, or exotic plants grown here or abroad, they certainly are a scourge. They certainly create untold misery and despair. The overuse, misuse, and abuse of these create devastation not only for individuals but families, neighborhoods, and entire communities. We hope some of the discussion we've had tonight has helped you in your personal life. On behalf of the panelists, my colleague Linda Figueredo, the live audience here, and the fantastic crew of CBS 12, we'd like to thank you at home for joining us. Make certain you watch our late news for coverage of this town hall and all the day's breaking news. We're continuing the discussion on our Facebook page at facebook.com/CBS12. Tell us what you think. In closing, we'd like to salute our military, law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, and other emergency personnel for their service to our communities and our nation. I'm Mark Hyman. Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is great.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for being a part of this evening.